Hello, I am Sylvia L'Ecuyer, and in this episode of Intimate Conversations, three guests are Magdalena Loth-Hill, violinist, Eliza Bogdanova, altist, and George Ross, cellist, members of the Consone Quartet, who will be performing in Vancouver on February 17th at Christ Church Cathedral. Welcome to you three.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Quite exciting to have 3/4 of the quartet with us this morning. It's quite exciting. And tell me, Magdalena, when this quartet was formed and started to perform as a group?
Well, we met at the Royal College of Music in London when we were students, and we started playing together as a quartet probably about 10 years ago. But we had been playing together in various other constellations. So George and I played a lot of Baroque music together, and with Agatha, who sadly isn't here today, but we'd be playing lots of orchestral stuff as well. And then it was kind of George's idea, really. I have to give him credit to put this quartet together in order to explore the kind of repertoire that we play, but on gut strings specifically. So yeah, it's been about 10 years now that we've been playing together.
Wow. And Agata Daraskaita, you mentioned, is also in your group, and she has Lithuanian, Polish roots. You have Polish roots too. George from UK. There is a very Society of Nations there. I think Bulgaria also, Eliza. So when you get together to play music together, what unites your way of playing? How come you're all together, Eliza?
We always joke about George being a quarter Ukrainian or something, because we always talk about the Eastern European power of our quartet. Because as a family, you know how you essentially become a family as a string quartet. You have to have that slight directness eventually with each other. But we love each other really, and it's brilliant to discuss music together, and I think we all have a lot of respect for each other's musicianship. And for me, because I joined the quartet slightly later than the other three, for me it was always very special joining them, and I felt like a lot of things from the beginning didn't need to be said. We just kind of had a communal feeling about playing together, which is always a plus.
Mm-hmm. And you were all trained in England too, where of course you put all your knowledge together. You're called a period quartet. What does that mean, George, a period quartet?
Well, as Magda mentioned before, the idea was always to play on gut strings, this sort of music from 1750 all the way to 1900, really, the classical and romantic period of music, which is not so often done. There are less than a handful of string quartets in the UK that play on gut strings, so it's quite unique in that respect. And then we use slightly weird bows, which are sort of transitional bows. So then bow, which is convexly shaped, where you can, it's curved like a modern bow essentially, but it doesn't have all of the bits of metal and the stuff at the heel that weighs it down. But it's got that curve, that convex curve, that means that you can sustain the sound for sort of long singing melodies, but it's light enough that you can still sort of dance about. It's not glued to the string all the time.
So you said something important for me to understand, actually. You said you can sustain longer lines if you have a bow like that, which is not possible with those curved bows. Yeah.
It's not so easy with a Baroque bow. They were just experimenting with a lot of things in the later 18th century. And then, they started adding bits of metal to them, and you get the romantic bow a bit later. But we sort of play on slightly rudimentary romantic bows. Yeah. But we just wanted to explore this world on gut strings, because it's just a different sound immediately, the way that you connect with a string, and it just gives you a different experience of how the instrument vibrates than if you play on a steel string.
Let me say something almost stupid. If you have gut string, there is kind of an animal living quality to it. Does it give warmth immediately to the sound? What do you think, Magdalena?
Yeah, definitely. It's a very different sound to modern metal strings, and in fact the method of sound production as well is very different. You have to kind of dig into the string a bit more. And it's perhaps a bit softer than modern metal strings. So when people hear us, they may be expecting a modern quartet sound, and it's something very different. I think there are lots of interesting colours to be found on gut strings, and particularly in the quieter dynamics, you can really explore some lovely colours. So it's kind of perfect for chamber music in smaller spaces, perhaps.
Is there a moment where we cannot talk about early music anymore? Because sometimes we see that early music brings out all sorts of repertoires, different kind of music, and now we have Mozart, which is more classical. So where's the border?
Good question, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, and we always get asked the question, where is the limit? And we haven't really set a limit as a group. We've been talking for years about one day exploring the Bartók quartets, because of course even they would have been played on guts. So lately the group's been exploring some French music, Debussy and Fauré, which is completely new territory for us. It's fascinating, and something we've worked on a lot together as a group is perhaps Mendelssohn. We feel very comfortable with Mendelssohn. We'll be bringing Fanny Mendelssohn's quartet to Canada, of course. And so stepping out of that comfortable territory and moving into Debussy, you kind of have to create your own language together once again from scratch as a group.
Wow, Debussy on gut strings then.
Yeah.
Sounds great. It sounds great.
I know that you already have a CD out where you had Haydn, I think, and Mendelssohn, and you will have more Mendelssohn coming. But I think I saw somewhere, George, that you are also thinking of contemporary music, like Gavin Bryars, for example.
Yeah, well, Gavin Bryars is writing us a string sextet with two colleagues who are coming over from the States. It was supposed to happen this last summer, just gone, but it will happen next year. As I feel like, Ellie, you might know more about this than.
Well, it is officially our first commission as a group, with the help of friends of the quartet and a few wonderful foundations that support us. So it's going to be the first piece written for us and for friends. And we thought Gavin Bryars' language is perhaps well suited to gut strings. He was really keen to explore that sort of sound world. I think he's writing an opera for a bigger group, also for gut strings. So he's really venturing into this territory, which is not entirely new to him, but he loves the idea of doing more. And we've been talking for years about how that makes sense for us as a group and whether playing contemporary music on guts is relevant. But there are plenty of composers who take interest in it and who make it work really nicely. So why not?
No, absolutely. I mean, the more, the better, and you can have diversity of colors and everything. The program you're bringing to Vancouver is Mozart, Haydn, Chevalier de Saint-Georges, and Fanny Mendelssohn. So those four composers lived at the same period. They are strict contemporaries. So that means that string quartet was really what to write at the time, no, Magdalena?
Yeah, definitely. Everybody was writing string quartets at that time, and they're very different pieces, though. I think that's interesting for us to explore repertoire from a similar period, but with such different characters. I mean, the Fanny Mendelssohn compared to Chevalier de Saint-Georges is such a completely different language. So yeah, it should be a fun program for us.
But Mozart and Haydn must be closer, because I think they were kind of emulating each other. I think Mozart was interested and impressed by Haydn's quartet. And so do we recognize the same language?
Yeah, there are definite similarities. So we're bringing a very early Mozart. So kind of Mozart figuring out how to write a string quartet, very kind of early days. And the Haydn actually is from his Opus 33 set, which he'd written his Opus 20 set, which was hugely popular. Lots of people were playing it. And then he took, I think, an interval of about 10 years before he then wrote the Opus 33 set. And the one that we'll be playing, number 2, The Joke, is perhaps the most famous from the set. So Haydn's kind of much more developed in this stage of his quartet writing. I think the Opus 20s were what people generally consider the first kind of quartets as we know them now in terms of form and structure. So yeah, they were inspired by each other, but very different.
I have to ask you to tell me the secret of the joke. What is it, a joke? And what I saw in the program, know that they tell us don't applaud too early because the joke will be on you. So what's the joke? Who dares to tell me?
I don't know if we should be saying, maybe we shouldn't give it away. It happens in the last movement, I'll say that.
Yeah, we have to do the joke well. We have to deliver it well in order for you perhaps not to applaud too soon.
Okay, but is it a bit like the Surprise Symphony? Because I think, is Haydn who wrote the Surprise Symphony, or Leopold Mozart? So one of those two.
Yeah, it's Haydn.
Yeah, Haydn.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll just follow very attentively and to see what's happening.
I think so. I think you have to come to the concert to find out what's funny.
The plan. That's the whole plan. Absolutely. But tell me, George, your instruments, the 4 instruments are very different too. An instrument from the 18th centuries, early 20th century or late 19th century. How come they can create this harmonious?
Yeah, we've got one from every century, actually, haven't we? Magda's sort of, how early is it? Late 17th century Magda's is.
Late 1600s. It's a Venetian instrument. We don't know who made it, but yeah, it's very old.
And then Aggie's violin is sort of 1770 English thing, which she says apparently Jacob Ford's violins were often mistaken for Italian instruments in their shape. And then Ellie's got a copy of an Italian sort of. It's influenced by many styles, isn't it? It's not one particular thing.
Yeah.
But it's a modern made instrument, which sounds somehow amazing with gut strings.
And your cello is brand new.
No, Ellie's cello is new. My cello, Ellie's viola is new. My cello is about 130 years old, 140 years old maybe. It's French.
So is it because they were just done on the same pattern that they have this homogeneous sound? Because you have to test to find the instruments that will fit together.
I find that some instruments just love gut strings, and that's the kind of main quality to look for. Impossible to tell, because when you go and look at instruments nowadays, they're mostly strung with metals. So you go to an auction house or a shop and it's all metal. So it's tricky. You have to make friends with the dealers and sort of say, can I borrow this? It takes a little bit of time for the guts to settle as well. I was very lucky with my viola that I found it just at the start of lockdown, and then it was kind of stuck in my hands. So I was lucky that I had the time to experiment, and I kept saying, I'm sorry, I can't buy it until I've tried it in context in the group. So that was my sneaky excuse.
But yeah, I suppose we have had situations with your viola and then even Magda trying 2 different violins, and people always bring stuff to the quartet and say, what do you think of this? And we figure out if it works within the group. But they're not, deliberately sort of matched to each other. But yeah.
Well, because you're well known also in UK now, you have the BC New Generation Artist status, which comes with some perks, I suppose. What does it do?
Yeah, it's been fantastic, actually. So we've done a lot of recording in the studio. So we've been kind of free to, if there's a piece that we particularly want to record, we're free to just go into the BBC studios and record, which is fantastic. It's an amazing opportunity. And we've had various concerts through the scheme as well, and many of those have been recorded. So it's been really great exposure for us. It's coming to an end, sadly. We had a little extension because of COVID, so we had an extra year, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's been a really good platform for us. And it's also been an opportunity to collaborate with other people on the scheme, which is something we love doing anyway. We really love meeting fellow like-minded musicians and collaborating on things. So that's been wonderful to have the opportunity to play with some amazing musicians.
I also saw that you were interested in education. You're interested in approaching young performers and work with them. Elitsa, what does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah, we have done a fair bit of chamber music coaching in some of the UK institutions. We went over to Ireland recently and coached on a lovely summer course. Yeah, we love working with young musicians, and I feel like as us as musicians, we feel we can most contribute to chamber coaching because that's what we're perhaps most passionate about. We have also been creating our own sort of education outreach routine, which is for sort of schools, so not necessarily young people who specialize in music yet, but it's a way of getting them, you know, excited and passionate about music. So going in and talking and performing at larger groups of children. And we have a program called Papa Haydn's Garden, because there's all these, you know, themed string quartets, such as the frog and the bird and the sunrise. So there's a lot of sort of imagery there to explore.
You said the word frog, and I was watching a video that you did somewhere, I can't remember, the London Symphony, I think, and you were describing the parts of your bows and instrument, and there was a frog, which is part of your bow. What is this?
The piece at the handle where you hold it is attached to the stick where the hair originally comes out. That's called the frog. I don't know what it's called in French.
Well,
isn't it froche? Isn't that?
Oh, it's froche. It is
from French. Yeah. That's the first time I heard that word ever as a kid, was in French, in fact, for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, so lots of wonderful things coming from French, including my accent, which I cannot able to make disappear today, unfortunately. We talked a little bit about Mozart and Haydn being close together and influencing each other and writing quartet. What we discover is a Chevalier de Saint-Georges, where I think we heard a couple of his symphonies now. It's starting to be known, even an opera I saw done in LA, I think. But did he also write a lot of quartets? I really was a great violinist himself. Magdalena.
Yeah, I think so. He was born in Guadeloupe, and he traveled to France when he was quite young. And I think he even studied with the L'Ecuyer, possibly. So he was clearly a very talented violinist. As far as I know, he only wrote 3 sets of 6 quartets. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong here. I think they're just 3 sets of 6. And they're quite, the set that we're playing a quartet from they're all quite short. And it's our first experience of playing this music. So we've been wanting to program some of his music for a long time. And finally, we have the opportunity. So I think is it from his Opus 1? Somebody needs to correct me if I'm saying the wrong.
Yes.
Opus number 3, I think, that we'll be bringing to Canada.
And he was a leading figure in the musical life in Paris, which was quite amazing. I mean, he commissioned work, he conducted concerts. It's amazing. He was in contact with Haydn too.
Yeah, quite an important figure in a way. I recently heard his violin concerto, which was brilliant. Again, just performed here in London recently, and yeah, it was excellent.
Well, I will ask you, George, now to present me Fanny Mendelssohn, because she wrote only 1 quartet, and you were there with those 3 women playing that music. Yeah. How come she wrote only 1 quartet, and how come we never play it?
Well, Fanny was never really published as a composer. I mean, she published some lieder, and it's not that she was discouraged from writing. Her husband, I think, was very encouraging. He would put a piece of manuscript paper on her piano every day and say, I want this filled in by the end of the day.
Wow.
But she wasn't really encouraged to, publish her work. She actually had a concert series that went on where she would perform on the piano and perform with friends. But she wasn't really sort of, out there in public publishing her works. But I think even the songs that she ended up publishing, she actually went against her brother's wishes. She sort of asked him, "Oh, should I go and do this?" And he said, "No, I don't think you should." But she did it anyway. So she
But I
clearly
think
had her own
the
motivation.
brother made up at the end, because after her death, I think he helped having her work published, isn't it, Magdalena?
I think so, but he died very soon after her death, I think, as well. Yeah, tragically young. And I often think, what more would these composers have created if they'd lived longer?
Yeah.
But I think they maintained a really wonderful correspondence, the two siblings, and Fanny would often write to her brother, as George said, for advice. And it's really interesting reading back what he says to her and how he advises her. But I think, yeah, she, as George says, she was supported definitely by her husband, who was really keen to support her music making, but sadly she wasn't encouraged to do it in a professional capacity. It was more in the home.
But then you want to embark.
Some very unique. Oh, sorry, this is Zoom. Some very unique stuff in it as well, like the romance in the middle. You don't get in any other kind of string quartet of Mendelssohn's. You get his kind of scherzo ideas, and even the first movement is quite rhapsodic. And there's this amazing romance in the middle that has a big storm in the middle of it. Yeah, looking forward to playing it
already
again.
romantic music. It's
Very
already
romantic.
so.
Yeah. But you are embarking in recording the big brother quartets now. Is that what you're going to do, Eliza?
Yeah. So we've done one already. In fact, okay, so starting from the beginning, we recorded 2 of his pieces on our debut CD. But this was part of the EEE merging program in Embrunais in France. So that was a sort of one-off project, whereas now we are signed to the Scottish label Lynn Records, and that would be for a full Mendelssohn cycle. So we've done the first CD of that, and this will be released midway through March, which is very soon now. Feels like ages ago that we recorded it. It's always like that with recording, isn't it? Yeah, so hopefully more from that soon, but that particular CD has a very interesting piece on it. It's the string quartet from 1823. It doesn't have an opus number. It was published after his death, and not many people perform it. Even in what they call complete cycles, this piece isn't really featured.
Well, thank you for digging in and making that known to us. That's very, very exciting. Well, this is wonderful to talk to you all. Say hello to what is your name of the fourth one? Agatha for me, and then she will be, of course, joining you on the tour. We're looking forward to you. Thank you for the time being, Magdalena, Eliza, and George, for chatting with me today. And for you who are listening, I remind you that you can purchase your tickets to the Consone Quartet concert on February 17th at earlymusic.bc.ca. And I certainly hope you will join us for the next episode of Intimate Conversations.